this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
The Middle is supported by Journalism Funding Partners, a nonprofit organization striving to increase the sustainability of local journalism by building connections between donors and news organizations. More information on how you can support The Middle at listentothemiddle.com. Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, joined as always by our house DJ Tolliver. And Tolliver, we have a busy summer coming up politically.
I know we do, but why can't every day be debate day, man? And we could do the show 7 days a week and never sleep.
Yeah, right, exactly. We'll see if we even get the first one. So next week, we're going to be doing a special episode of The Middle right after the presidential debate, assuming it happens, between Biden and Trump. We're going to be taking calls for listener reaction from around the country. So that's next week. And then the political conventions are coming up this summer. The Republicans go first in July. And it turns out that the big speeches from the candidates are scheduled to occur right in the middle of the time when we air live on the radio. So we're going to be recording a special episode in advance for each convention asking what it means to be a Republican in 2024 for the Republicans and what it means to be a Democrat in 2024 for the Democrats. And the reason we're bringing this up right now is because I want to ask Republican listeners, since Republicans go first, to call in and leave us a message. What does it mean to you to be a Republican in 2024? Tolliver, how can they reach us?
The same way they always do at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com.
And by the way, don't do that right now, because we're doing a show right now. You can leave those messages later, but right now you can talk to us about money in politics. The United States spends far more on elections than any other nation on earth. In the 2020 election alone, total political spending amounted to over $14 billion. That was more than the GDP of Madagascar. Now, there have been efforts to curb the influence of money in our politics. The Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, that's also known as the McCain-Feingold Act, put into place limits on some spending in campaigns. But then 8 years later, the Supreme Court issued their ruling in the Citizens United case, which ruled that freedom of speech prohibits the government from limiting political spending by nonprofits, labor unions, and most notably corporations. And that has led to seemingly endless amounts of cash coming into campaigns, often with little information about who's behind it. So that's our question this hour. Is money corrupting our politics? Tolliver, again, give us the number.
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or write to us at listentothemiddle.com.
And let's meet our panel. Terry Goddard is the former Attorney General of Arizona and the former mayor of Phoenix. He led the 2022 effort to pass a Stop Dark Money ballot initiative in his home state, which passed with 72% of the vote. He joins us from KJZZ in Phoenix. Terry Goddard, welcome to The Middle.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we squeaked that one through.
It's just 72%. Sarah Bryner is also with us. She is director of research at Open Secrets, which tracks money in U.S. politics. She's in Chicago. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, happy to be here.
Well, so before we get to the phones, Sarah, I want to start with you. We mentioned the landmark U.S. Supreme Court ruling known as Citizens United, but can you tell us just briefly what effect that has had and how it has changed the way political campaigns have been financed since then?
I like to think of Citizens United as a case that really opened the floodgates to money in politics. So not only did it roll back a lot of the reforms that happened earlier in the century, but it created the possibility for groups to exist that can spend huge amounts of money outside of our traditional sort of disclosed universe. And that has led to a sort of environment where millionaires and billionaires can drop huge amounts of money into the election really late in the game without anyone knowing who they are, really affecting the messaging. And I think that that's super problematic.
Terry Goddard, you left office as in Arizona the year after Citizens United was ruled on by the Supreme Court. At that time, did you realize what effect it would have?
I saw that effect, yes, and I lived it because I was running for statewide office that same year in 2010. And my experience was that, at least in Arizona, and I think it was even more in other places, the cost of running for office went up by 5 times. And that was a direct result of opening the floodgates of corporate money coming into elections. And the dark money phenomenon was what really got my attention because in Arizona we sort of led the parade for anonymous, massive contributions trying to tip the scale one way or the other.
And dark money, by the way, just for our listeners, just basically means money where you don't know who's behind it.
That's right. That's the money from people you can't see for laws you don't like. It's the kind of anonymity that was not required by Citizens United, but when the corporate players started coming in, they liked to say they were above the fray. They didn't want to tip their hand. They didn't want to have consumer reaction to their political contributions, so they loved doing it secretly.
Sarah, I have to say that even when the information is there, it's often very hard to follow the money in politics. What kind of a difference does it make, do you think, when voters have access to the information about who's funding what?
There's some great political science research that says that people actually trust ads that are run by groups with names like Americans for a Better America than they do when they're run by ads by candidates. So if it's from something that you don't have a reaction to, you believe it. And so laws like the one in Arizona, and then there are other states that have implemented similar laws in the past, like Alaska and Maine, that tell people, oh, Americans for a Better America, that's actually ExxonMobil, can be monumentally influential in getting to the bottom of what's actually trying to influence your opinion. Because as soon as you hear that term, ExxonMobil or Target or whatever, like you have a completely different reaction than when it's just anonymous political group. And I think that that is hugely influential in our politics.
Yeah, and Terry Goddard, just tell us briefly what your bill that you got through, passed with 72% support in Arizona, what does it do in the state?
Well, basically it asks the so-called dark money, the anonymous contributors. Most of them are hidden through the provision in the Internal Revenue Code that allows for political advocacy by what we call 501c4 organizations. And basically what it does is it says we only wanted to go after major players. So if you have spent $50,000 or more in statewide races, then you're required to disclose the original source that's contributed $5,000 or more to you. So anybody under $5,000 we didn't require reporting on, but any of the big contributions above that were required to fess up and report within 5 days to the Secretary of State as a public document. And what I think is unique about the Arizona law is that in other states, the dark money contributors hide their tracks very artfully. And I used to be a prosecutor. I used to do a lot of work on money laundering. And frankly, although it's legal what they were doing, it was money laundering because they wanted to make it really hard for public and the news media to find who they were. So what our statute does is it basically, through a series of disclosures, gets to the original source. In other words, the corporation or the person who started the money rolling. And it may go through 4, 5, 6 intermediaries. We've seen them that go offshore and then come back in the United States. They did exactly the same thing the drug cartels do to try to hide the source of their money.
Let's get to the phones and Rebecca, who's in central Minnesota. Hi, Rebecca. Welcome to The Middle.
Yes, I think that it should be absolute, complete transparency as far as who is donating to the funds for elections. Absolute full disclosure, and that is really important, I think. And just judging from what audacities that Trump has done and his blatant disregard of laws, that a lot of the Republicans are, it seems like, and maybe Democrats too, but especially the Republicans seem like they're emboldened by Trump and what he has done and not having to be accountable and just encouraging disregard of the laws.
Disregard of the laws. Rebecca, thank you for that. Sarah Bryner, when Rebecca talks about disregard of the laws, I mean, they're obviously, Trump was just convicted, but aside from that, what about the campaign finance laws? If you blatantly disregard the campaign finance laws, does anybody come after you?
Yeah. So if you don't disclose your donors or if you violate the disclosure laws in any way, theoretically, the Federal Election Commission can come after you, or the Department of Justice, depending on what you do. Fact of the matter is, elections, even though they feel like they go on forever, are actually fairly short-term events. And so much of the disclosure that we see that's driven by legal sort of pushes comes after the election itself. And, you know, that's a problem when you're a voter trying to say what's going on. Well, you don't know because it's in court. And so I think that, you know, Rebecca's question sort of brought to mind the fact that, like, both of the parties are guilty of using dark money. It supports both Democrats and Republicans. But I think that the Supreme Court, when they argued Citizens United, if they were being genuine, made it clear that disclosure was paramount to the sort of functional democracy. And so I think that we've navigated away from that a little bit because the parties have figured out how to get around that. But we just need to look to what Scalia and Justice Roberts said, which was that, you know, we still need to know who you are, even if you're doing all this sketchy stuff.
A reminder, you can reach us at 844-4MIDDLE. That is 844-464-3353. Or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. Our question this hour is money corrupting our politics. And Tolliver, we've been talking about the Citizens United decision from the Supreme Court, which has had a profound impact on campaign spending.
Yeah, and one of its champions was Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate. A year after the ruling, McConnell spoke about what he saw as the positive outcome it would have on our political system.
My view is the American citizens have to have an opportunity to push back against this massive, overreaching government that is trying to regulate every aspect of our lives. And the way you push back in a country of over 300 million is to have a voice. So all Citizens United basically did was to level the playing field for corporate America and say, you can participate. Why shouldn't everybody be free to do that? I think it was a terrific decision. I don't think there's any harmful consequences to come out of it.
Finally, somebody standing up for corporate America, giving them a voice.
Well, and it's safe to say that there are a lot of people who would disagree with that assessment. But we hope that you are enjoying The Middle, and we'll be right back with more in a moment.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
to be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, and philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking you, is money corrupting our politics? Tolliver, what is that number to call in?
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on social media.
I'm here with former Arizona Attorney General and Phoenix Mayor Terry Goddard and Sarah Bryner, Director of Research at Open Secrets. Before we get back to the phones, Terry Goddard, what do politicians themselves think about campaign finance reform? Is it an issue that some are publicly for but privately against?
Publicly, actually, it's the other way around. I think most politicians in office tend to be, especially in the area of transparency, very wishy-washy. Former politicians are very strong in opposition to dark money and transparency. But Rebecca, the caller, just mentioned something that I thought was critically important. I tried 4 different election cycles to get the Stop Dark Money on the ballot in Arizona. And so I talked to literally thousands of people in the process of passing petitions to get it on the ballot. Not one of them ever said, I would prefer not to know who's buying the ads that are trying to influence my vote. I want to be fooled. So it is really popular. Our polling was usually around 90%. Bipartisan, in the middle, if you will, appropriate for this show. In a very divided state. Arizona's split right down the middle, literally 50-50. But 72% voted in favor, and I think a lot more would have if it was clearer on the ballot. In other words, you had to vote yes to stop dark money. That's kind of unintuitive. And so, but the popularity, as James Carville said once, it's just good politics.
I remember that those 2 referenda in Ohio in the last year involving abortion. One was to change the Constitution, and one was to put abortion rights in the Constitution. And one was like, if you're in favor, you say yes, and the other one was, if you're in favor, you say no. It's a very, very complicated the way they do these ballot measures sometimes. Let's go to Elliot, who is in Prairie Village, Kansas. Elliot, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
Hello. Yes. If a corporation is a person and can donate money, but they can't vote, doesn't that seem like that's a issue in terms of just the reality of what we're trying to do here, vote?
You're talking about Citizens United there, and the whole idea that corporations are people too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Terry Goddard, you laughed at that. I'm going to let you take that.
Thank you. It's an extraordinary proposition that in all ways corporations are people, and that was the Citizens United ruling. And yes, they can't vote, but they also can't suffer harm in the way people can. And so one of the legal challenges against our proposition, after it was passed by 72% of the voters in Arizona, was that individuals would be doxxed or harassed or threatened by having to disclose their identity as a contributor. And the cases that they used were the civil rights cases of NAACP out of the 50s in the South. But there's a big difference. A corporation can't be hung. It can't be harmed physically. And
It can.
I think that's a big physically. I think that's a big difference. And so we need to draw some lines outside of Citizens United.
Elliot, go ahead.
A corporation can be ended.
Can be ended. Okay. It can't be harmed physically like a person.
Ominous.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Bo, who's in St. Anthony, Idaho. Bo, welcome to the middle. Go ahead.
Hi. Yes, thank you for having me on. I just wanted to kind of bring it to a more general discussion almost. In my opinion, money is definitely corrupting our politics in a lot of ways. There's a lot of different things that go into it, but to even have a re-election campaign, you almost have to start that from day one after you get elected for not just the presidency, but for Congress and everything. So much of elected officials' time just goes into fundraising for these corporations whose, all of our economy and the corporations in it is really focused on continuous growth. And I think it's kind of generally understood that the federal and local governments are there for stability for the general public and to regulate these corporations. But when they're the ones getting the elected officials in and the elected officials just spend most of their time campaigning and fundraising, nothing important can get done, it seems like, to the general public. And it's really frustrating. And it even goes into last week's episode of how we get the politics out of climate change, too, by tackling this money that's in our politics.
So Bo, what would you do? What would you do about it?
It's hard for any elected official to feel like they can do anything without upsetting some donor, some contributor. I feel like so. One thing that comes to mind for me is where I live, right by Grand Teton National Park. The only reason that park is as big as it is because a member of the Rockefeller family just decided to give it to the government instead of passing it down through the generations. And so it feels like it really just is going to take wealthy individuals, wealthy corporations just choosing to do the right thing because they want to, and not because it's going to perpetuate their success and further down the road.
Bo, thank you for that. Sarah Bryner, your thoughts on that, and specifically Bo's point that politicians have to spend so much of their time raising money. And of course, if you do that, you're probably going to pick up the phone when that person who made your fundraising a little bit easier calls.
I am going to assume that what Bo said is correct, just for the purposes of conversation. And I think it is. If you give money, you're going to get your phone answered. But I think that there are two things here that are not just typical corporation giving to politician dynamics. One is that Citizens United made it possible for millionaires and billionaires to give $1 million contributions. And the other is that alongside that, we've seen this huge rise in donations from small donors. You can think of people like Matt Gaetz, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a bunch of people from both sides who have really relied on small donors. And those people aren't showing up in D.C. saying, hey, AOC, can you have a meeting with me? They're supporting that candidate because they believe in them. That's the good side. On the other side, you also have these millionaires and billionaires. I look towards the corporations as the moderating effect, because those corporations want to have just standard politics as normal conversations to get some, boring like tax credit passed. It's the millionaires and billionaires funding the super PACs that are saying, let's push the politics to the extremes. And I think that is what really has happened as a result of Citizens United. It's not that Target or Walmart, who I think it was Elliot said, like, they're exposed. They have consumers. They're not the problem. It's the, really super rich people who don't have consumers, who don't have to care about what we think, who are pushing the politics to the extremes.
Let's go to Claudia, who's in Chicago. Claudia, welcome to the middle. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I think I was saying that it's not really a question of whether money is corrupting politics. It's how it's corrupting. And I think the previous caller gave an example of how it's doing it. And I think overall, it dilutes the individual more than it does benefit the corporate. Corporates have way more money than the individual to give to a cause. So what does it do to the individual voter?
Have you ever given money to a campaign, Claudia?
I have, yes.
Yeah, and do you feel like do you get anything back from that, or is it just you're doing it because you believe in it and you're not expecting anything in return?
I do it mostly because I believe in it. I don't believe that I get a direct, benefit of that, but I do donate to causes and to people that I think might have my best interest in mind.
Mm-hmm. Claudia, thank you for that. Terry Goddard, what do you think of that from Claudia, that these larger donations basically dilute anything small that's coming in?
They really do. I think it's part of the pervasive feeling that government doesn't represent me, that I hear all the time from regular folks. They feel that the millionaires, billionaires are able to put their finger on the scale and move things dramatically one way or the other. And for instance, let me just use our example here in Arizona. The population was overwhelmingly, as we proved in the election in 22, in favor of providing transparency. But the election, the officials, the legislators, were never willing to even give a hearing to a bill that would have done that. Huge difference between what the people wanted and what the elected representatives of the people were willing to even consider. And I think that shows they were, the litany that I think is absolutely true is they were afraid of the dark money. They either got some, or they wanted to get some, or they were afraid that the big money would oppose them in a primary. So the bottom line was they were afraid of it, and therefore they didn't want to do anything to harm it. And that unfortunately is an example of other places where money doesn't talk, it roars.
Ooh. Hey, Jeremy, we got an email in from John in Rockford, Illinois. He says, if a citizen offers money to a judge in response to the way he interprets the law, that's a bribe. If a citizen offers money to a cop in response to the way he enforces the law, that's a bribe. But if a citizen or organization offers money to an elected legislator in response to the way he makes the laws, that's just campaign fundraising and not at all illegal or unethical.
Sarah Bryner, is that true? What do you think about that?
I mean, that is true.
But there was a moment recently where it was reported that Donald Trump had a meeting with a bunch of oil executives, and basically said to them, "You need to give me $1 billion to my campaign, and then I'll reverse all these decisions from the Biden administration." Is that legal to do that if he did that?
I don't know. I think it's an open question. It's tricky.
Sounds like a quid pro quo.
And which you're not allowed to do, right? You can't do a quid pro quo like that.
No.
I'm just asking. I mean,
that's called bribery.
Or can you?
Right. That's called bribery. Yeah. Right. Sarah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that, it's really difficult to draw the line. And that's the purpose here, is that it's complicated for a reason, because you can't challenge things when they become so just tricky that it seems like it might be illegal, but is it? I don't know. What line are we crossing here? Is it quid pro quo or not? And then you're just like, this is politics, this is normal. And that's what that kind of Trump saying, I'm going to give you this, but I'm not going to give you this line in this bill with this specific consequence. That's beside the point. There is an exchange of goods and services here. And I think that that's what gets lost in these legalese discussions.
Let's go to Jim in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Jim, welcome to the middle. What do you think? Is money corrupting our politics?
Well, I think it is. And I think what I wanted to say is I think there's a very insidious line of reasoning that's been going on, and it's part of what got Trump elected, and I'm sure other people will follow. But it's this idea that if you come from money or have your own money, you're somehow more immune to corruption by money. And I don't think there's any evidence for that.
Interesting point. What do you think, Terry Goddard? I remember Michael Bloomberg running for mayor in New York saying, I'm spending my money. I'm not going to be beholden to anybody.
Well, you do hear that a lot. And I think it is a direct reaction to what we've been hearing from the callers, that this is a feeling that you want to have elected officials who are somehow immune to the forces of big contributors. And maybe somebody who's already a millionaire is less likely to respond. I think you also have to look, however, at how they made that $1 million and what they had to do to get it, because their prejudices may show in that way. Yeah. But it is an argument that you hear, and unfortunately, it has some validity.
I was wondering whether there were going to be a lot of calls on this show, and all the lines are full, so that's exciting. Mary is with us from Western North Carolina. Hi, Mary. Welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you? I think that money has already corrupted our politics. I don't feel like there's a candidate that can run successfully because unless they have a lot of money, and therefore they aren't representing the common man or common woman. I'm from a very rural area, and in no way do I feel represented by anyone because they haven't gone through the struggles that I have, of having to be a single parent, having to figure out how we're going to pay the bills. And all they're worried about is, how much money they can get from their fundraising dinner. And there's no way I would even consider doing that. And it's not Democrat or Republican, it's all of them. In reference to whether someone is corruptible or less corruptible based on whether they have money, well, yeah, everybody's corruptible. Finding that perfect person is very difficult.
So what do you do when it comes to election time, Mary?
Well, usually I vote. I vote according to the person that I think is going to best represent me. But I'm of that people right now that I'm frustrated. I don't feel like I have a good choice this year. And it frustrates me, and that bothers me. I was brought up to be a good citizen, to vote, and to put people in office. And my mother she worked for senators. My grandfather worked for the people in government. But I am very frustrated at this point that I don't know if I'm going to vote, and that almost embarrasses me. It's to the point that I'm like, why vote? Why? Yeah. Because it's not going to matter anymore.
Mary, thank you for that
right
call.
Now, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, let me take that to Sarah Bryner because it gets to just the heart of this. She feels that the money is really making the candidates so unappealing.
I mean, I hear you. I hear you from the depths of my soul, because I grew up in Alaska, very similar kind of upbringing, it sounds like. And I don't see the people running for office as reflective of me. And I think that a lot of that is because to run for federal office, you need to either be able to spend all of your free time fundraising to counteract the super PACs that are able to, fundraise with like a drop of a hat. Or you need to be independently wealthy like Mike Bloomberg, or you need to be embedded in DC like the incumbents. And I say that sounding cynical, and I think that you and I both share that frustration at feeling that cynicism. But that is the way the system is right now. And I think that the fundamental changes that need to happen are both in money and also the way that we vote for people.
Well, stand by, because Tolliver, believe it or not, some politicians actually want to limit the amount of money going into our elections.
Yeah, John McCain, to name one. Here's the late Arizona senator speaking on the matter at a 1997 conference on political reform.
Real reform has to do two things. It must limit the influence of money in campaigns, and it's got to level the playing field between challengers and incumbents. Those are the two principles we seek. Now, opponents say that anything we are trying to do is restrictive of free speech, thereby equating free speech and money. I do not believe that money means free speech in America, and if it does, then there's a couple of 100 million Americans that have very little free speech.
That was just 5 years before the passage of McCain-Feingold, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act.
Oh, okay.
By the way, Tolliver, our listeners, if they haven't seen you perform live, they can go and sign up for our weekly newsletter. And I believe we posted a video of you performing in Waterbury, Connecticut, one of your entire songs. Yes.
Oh, my God.
Your dance moves are lit. Okay.
That's why I'm on the show.
We'll be right back with more of The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. We're asking you this hour, is money corrupting our politics? Call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or reach out at listentothemiddle.com. I'm joined by former Arizona Attorney General Terry Goddard and Sarah Bryner, Director of Research at Open Secrets. And Sarah, before we go back to the phones, it is kind of head spinning sometimes to follow the money. There was a recent Trump campaign event, which the campaign claims brought in about $50 million. Yeah. The money raised, according to the invitation, listen to this, will be directed to the Trump 47 Committee, which is a share fundraising agreement among the Trump campaign, the Republican National Committee, and roughly 40 state parties. Under that agreement, the first $6,600 of any contribution will go to Trump's campaign, the next $5,000 to the Save America PAC, which he has used to pay his legal bills, and the RNC will get the next $413,000, and the rest goes to the dozens of state parties. What? How?
Byzantine.
I know. It's on purpose. It's on purpose to confuse us. And also, I will say that up until like this last month, the Trump campaign did not raise any money for state parties, which really annoyed them. So he was spending most of it on his legal expenses. But now he has more of it because he got convicted of felonies, and so that money is getting allocated. But regardless, it's like it's confusing. And that is the story, right? And that, I think, leaves the voter behind. And I think that that's one of the reasons why the Arizona law that Terry can talk about is so critical, because it's really trying to tell the voter and the person who is behind these efforts.
But Terry, the Arizona law does not apply to federal races in Arizona, right?
No, we don't have that kind of power. But
Right.
We were talking about heroes. I would single out Senator Sheldon Whitehouse in the U.S. Senate, who's been absolutely intrepid and consistent about trying to get the Disclose Act and other pieces of legislation through the Congress. And he's been stopped by the Mitch McConnells and the folks who are in favor of dark money and no disclosure at all. But McCain, an Arizonan, sort of led that fight. The Supreme Court got rid of what McCain-Feingold had done. And I think to answer Mary, we need to not step away from the political process, but be informed and use it to try to change the direction of American politics. We can, in fact, keep corporations out. It was a 5-4 decision. With different Supreme Court, we could go the other way.
I do believe that one thing that still remains from the McCain-Feingold Act is that the politicians in their ads have to say, I'm XYZ and I approve this message. That came out of that law, I believe. Let's go to Sean.
But when you're Americans
for better America, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You don't have to say that, and you don't.
Right. Let's go to Sean, who's in Minnesota. Sean, welcome to the middle.
Hello. So, yeah, I am actually a Republican primary challenger for U.S. House against Brad Finstey down here in Minnesota's 1st Congressional District. But, yeah, I don't think money is inherently good or bad. I think it's just a lot of politicians fall subject to the same thing a lot of people and businesses do, goal displacement. They start, maybe they have an idealism that they want to make change, just like maybe a company has a goal and they want to promote a product, but, after a little ways in, you start getting caught up on all the secondary and third goals, and you kind of lose focus
sight
on your original vision. Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think that nothing needs to be done about money in politics, or how do you feel about it right now? Do there need to be major changes made to it?
Well, I mean, in some aspects, I'm kind of a yes and no, but I think part of it is until you get to a certain momentum, a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention to you. For example, like as a Republican challenger, I would say not a lot of people would pay attention to the challengers at this point in the game. So there's not a lot of money moving. It's more of once you get trenched in Washington, then people start paying attention to you and you show up on radars. So I don't know if it's inherently good or bad. I think it's just kind of like who you know, when you know it, when people gain focus on you and all those kind of things added together. The more people that are around you, the more easy it is to get persuaded or, focus on other goals than your original campaign slogan.
Well, let me ask you one final thing, Sean. If you were able to get into Congress, how are you going to avoid that sort of getting away from the main reason that you got in there and getting caught up in whatever your funders want?
I would love to limit the campaign season to just a few months and let 18 months of the 2-year term or something, you can focus on your work, and then, maybe the last 6 months or a few months, then you can focus on what you actually need to do to get reelected.
Yeah. Sean, thank you for calling in. Terry Goddard, what do you think about that? Limiting the campaign time, would that make a big difference?
It could. I mean, it sounds unconstitutional, unfortunately, but it could. And I think there are lots of things that we could do. I had a friend in Washington said that she wanted to do a national initiative to require Congresspeople to work an 8-hour day for the public. In other words, not be in a closed room making phone calls, but actually attending hearings and responding to constituents and doing what we think congressmen ought to do. That's an interesting idea. Maybe we could get that going. Another says that a certain percentage of your contribution should come from your district if you're going to Congress, or from your state if you're in the Senate. That's been tried out. I think it needs some honing, but that's a reform that could work. And I can't say enough about how much the credibility of politics would be impressed and improved by having a national bill for full disclosure of all contributions, where they come from, who the original source was.
Let's go to Shantan, who's in Las Vegas. Hi, Shantan. Welcome to the middle. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, I've been listening to all these callers, and I think they all make very good points that there is, big money already in politics, and we have to face the reality that it exists, and we can't escape it. But the real problem is it's just the common person's voice being drowned out by big money. That is the real problem. We don't care about money in politics. It's that our voices are not being heard. I think it's time for us to really focus on novel methods to make sure that our voices are heard in the political process, rather than harp on the money object. It's already done. It's impossible for us to go back and remove money from politics.
So what would be the novel method, just briefly? What do you think should be done?
I think there should be a national petition system that lets individual voters take certain their opinions on certain topics that matter to them. I think it's high time in a state where we have such high technology. I think it's archaic to be based on our voices being only heard through this filter of the politician.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to think forward and not think backwards, and involve ourselves in this who is more popular, the popularity contest of the political system,
Yeah. Shantan, thank you very much for that call. Let's get to another one. Brian is in New Orleans, Louisiana. Brian, go ahead.
Hello. I think we live in a plutocracy. It's not a democracy anymore. That started in 1828 with Andrew Jackson and the Second U.S. Bank when they started donating money. What we need to do is have the $2,000 per constituent giving money to the campaign. It can't be corporations and unions, because that is not democracy. Democracy is government of, by, and for the people. And corporations and unions aren't the people. They should not be allowed to donate money to the campaigns. Also, you should not be able to give to someone outside your district or outside your state to a senator.
Wow.
That is corruption.
Brian, thank you for that. Sarah Bryner, let me go to you first on that. There's a lot there, but what about the idea of just sticking to the person who's making the donation, instead of saying you can give, thousands of dollars to the Trump 47 committee, and then you can give more to the party, and you can give more to the super PAC and all that. You say each person can only give $2,000 in a political campaign season.
Yeah, that sounds like public financing. And I think that what we have in the U.S., so there's all of the questions weave very nicely together. And somebody said, let's limit the campaign season. That would be nice. That, I think, is unconstitutional, as our Supreme Court has decided, based on the freedom of speech. So taking that off the table, let's have public financing. Let's not make this be privately financed. That worked for a while, but then Barack Obama actually said, you know what? I can raise a lot more money than I can get from the public financing program. I'm going to go do that. Bye-bye public financing. That terminated the public financing program essentially for presidential races. And so there have been states and cities that have taken efforts to return to public financing. And I think that there are varying degrees of success there. And one of the sort of metrics that we look at is how much the candidate takes from the city that they represent. But there needs to be political will behind those programs, because it is a lot easier to raise $1 million from a private donor, which the courts have routinely held is something that you have the right to do, than it is to go out and take, a couple $1,000s from the people. So to reform the financing program, I think is a much bigger process. I think that there's a lot of different components here that are interconnected.
Well, Terry Goddard, we've heard a lot of people talk about how things have already gone too far. There's no way to take the money out of politics at this point. But do you think that there's a moment when the amount of money flowing into a campaign goes from just the process of funding a campaign and making it work to corrupting our politics?
Oh, okay. I was going to get into public finance, but which I think is a great idea, and we need to pursue it further. I don't know where that magic point is. We use the word corruption because the Supreme Court did, and that they made it one of the standards for when you've gone too far. And what we're talking about generally with political contributions is not money in the pocket of the politician, but money for media, money for the very expensive things that it takes to be known to the public. And I think there's hope here, and the last caller I think really touched on it. I've seen some very innovative ideas. I think they're in Maine, where they basically, public finance would be $2,000 per voter, and they could contribute to whoever they wanted to during the cycle, all to one or spread it out. And then if you add that to complete transparency so that the voters will know exactly where everybody got their funding, they will be able to make their own choice. In other words, if it's only for millionaires, I think the voters will have that to take into consideration. If it's all from small contributors who use their chit, their $1,000 to put somebody in, up as a candidate, and the other part has got to be media reform. I mean, you have to have access to the airways. Public radio does a lot of good in that way, but the commercial airways basically dominate the campaigns. So is it corruption? No, not exactly, but it certainly is a domination of our politics, and it has degraded the process. And I think that's what I'm hearing from all of your callers. Hopefully not to the point of despair.
There also needs to be fact-checking. Media doesn't need to let there be content on the airwaves that is factually untrue, that's bought and paid for by millionaires. And that's something that publicly financed media could do with political will.
I will point out that it seems that we're moving in the opposite direction, because the debate that is supposed to happen next week is not going to be like a normal presidential debate. It's a CNN presidential debate, and every network that runs it has to run the CNN commercials and all that stuff. I mean, it's like it's putting more money into that system rather than less. Let's go to John in Fort Worth, Texas. John, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a question of if the money is influencing, everything right now. It definitely is. And I think more so importantly, I think at a federal level, obviously, the elected officials, campaign donating to them, that's one thing. But even I think at a local level, for example, like here in Tarrant County, there's been I think I've seen a couple of corruption cases that have come up from elected officials. And so I don't, and I would say it's probably even more important at a local level to where, it probably affects us a little bit more because we live in the cities and the counties. And so they obviously make laws at a federal level. It's one thing, but I think we need to pay more attention also at a local level, what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly why Terry Goddard, I guess, got this ballot measure through at the local level in Arizona. John, do you pay attention to who donates to various campaigns? Do you go online? Do you look up who's funding these candidates?
It's weird, but when I see, like, for example, I think you guys brought it up earlier, the American, I forgot what Institute or something like that, and I was like, okay, who's really behind that? So I started doing a little bit of research. I'm like, okay, this is really this, and so I kind of find my way to find out where the money's kind of really coming from, and it is interesting to see that in some cases there's these big corporations behind it, and I'm like, okay, well, this really doesn't sound I'm not sure if I'm really behind this anymore.
John, thank you very much. Sarah Bryner, then last word to you on this. How many people like John and across America are going into places like Open Secrets and looking up who's funding what and making a decision based on that information?
Not enough. I think that John is the perfect example of, like, when you hear that Americans for a Better America or what have you is actually X, Y, or Z, thank you, Arizona law and Alaska law and Maine law, you have a different reaction. But like most people, we're busy buying groceries. We're busy paying for childcare. We're busy, enjoying our lives. We're not going out there researching our political donors. And I think that the law needs to predict the citizenry, not vice versa.
Okay, I have good news. First of all, thanks to everybody who called in, and you can still leave messages on our voicemail, which we listen to, and we will play some of them next week. But the good news is, Tolliver, it is time for a brief quiz for our guests.
Oh, my God. And this one's a little biased, I'm sorry to say. According to OpenSecrets.com, what percentage of political contributions come from men? 58%, 50%, 45%, or 40%?
58%.
Sarah,
biggest number.
You can't.
I'm not
She wrote the book. It's not quite fair.
It was an open book test.
All women know the answer to that question.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I want to thank my guests for the hour, former Arizona Attorney General Terry Goddard and Sarah Bryner, Director of Research at Open Secrets. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for opening this subject. It's so important.
It is very important. And Tolliver, next week we have a special late live edition of The Middle.
Yep, we'll be live right after the Trump and Biden debate. I'm sure it'll be very civil. You can join the conversation with your reaction by calling 8444-MIDDLE or going to listentothemiddle.com.
And you can always sign up for our weekly newsletter. The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Joanne Jennings, Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, and John Barth. By the way, it's Harrison Patino's birthday today, so happy birthday, Harrison. Our intern is Annika Deschler. Our technical director this week is Jason Croft, and thanks to KJZZ in Phoenix for hosting Terry Goddard this hour. Actually, it's in Tempe. Our theme music was composed by Andrew Haig. Thanks to Nashville Public Radio, iHeartMedia, and the more than 410 public radio stations that are making it possible for people across the country to listen to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I'll talk to you next week.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
14 years in prison for killing a young woman. A 15-year sentence for a crash that caused 3 deaths. 12 and a half years for killing a child and critically injuring her mother. All true stories, all caused by marijuana-impaired drivers. No matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So, if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.